I'm Margaret Collins, 59, and I saw my son-in-law throw a suitcase into the lake and run. What I found inside terrified me. That night changed everything, uncovering secrets about my daughter, a love hidden in shadows, and a truth buried for 35 years. Before I tell you what happened, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss this. After Thomas died, the silence in our old wooden house became a third presence. Just me, Charlie the cat, and the weight of memories pressed between floorboards. I filled my days with the garden Thomas loved, coaxing tomatoes and roses from soil that knew his hands better than mine. The only real light in those years was Emily, my daughter, and the life she'd built with David Turner. David? Everyone in Willow Creek loved David. He sold houses with the charm of a man who genuinely cared, where families laid down roots. He volunteered at St. Catherine's every Sunday, helped old Mrs. Henderson fix her roof last spring, brought me fresh baked bread from the farmer's market every other week. Your mother's special to me. Emily, he'd say, that practiced smile never quite reaching his eyes. Family means everything, but mothers know things. We feel them in our bones, in the spaces between words, in the way someone holds a coffee cup too tightly. David's eyes, pale blue, almost colorless, never warmed, even when his mouth smiled. They were glacier ice, beautiful and deadly if you looked too long. I'd never said anything. How could I? Emily seemed happy. They'd married 3 years ago, after David had consoled her through what she'd only called a difficult breakup. He'd been there when she needed someone. And isn't that what we all want? Someone who shows up? But last month, during Sunday dinner at my place, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Emily reached for the salt. David's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Hard, not the playful grab of a husband teasing his wife. This was control, fingers pressing white marks into her skin. Emily froze mid-reach, her face draining of color. "You salt everything too much, honey," David said softly, releasing her. "I worry about your health," she laughed. But it came out strangled. "You're right, I should watch that." When I asked if she was okay, after he left for the bathroom, Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm fine, Mom, really. Just tired from work." Tired. She'd been saying that word a lot lately. That night after they'd gone home, I stood on my porch with Charlie purring against my legs. The lake shimmered in the distance, dark water holding secrets beneath its surface. Wind moved through the pines with a sound like whispered warnings. Something was wrong. Every instinct I'd honed over 59 years of living screamed it. I just didn't know yet that within 2 weeks, I'd be standing at that lake's edge, watching my son-in-law throw something into the water that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Some truths don't wait for you to be ready. They rise from dark water whether you want them to or not. 3 months crawled by like wounded animals, and with each passing day, Emily slipped further away. The calls that used to come like clockwork, every morning at 9. Every evening after work became scattered echoes, 2 days without word, then 4. When she finally answered, her voice sounded hollow, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Are you okay?" "Sweetheart." "Just tired, Mom. Work's been heavy." Always the same answer. Always that word, tired. But mothers know how to read between the lines. We know when tired means something darker, something that doesn't have a name yet. I saw her last on a Tuesday in October. I showed up unannounced, something I never did, but worry had stolen sleep from me for 3 nights straight. Her house sat at the end of Maple Drive. A charming craftsman with blue shutters that David had sold them at a steal, he'd said. Now those shutters looked like closed eyelids, refusing to see what happened inside. Emily answered the door in an oversized sweater despite the mild weather. Her face had thinned, cheekbones too sharp, and dark crescents hung beneath her eyes like bruises. "Mom?" She didn't sound happy. She sounded startled, afraid even. "I didn't know you were coming. I brought your favorite, lemon poppy seed muffins." I held up the basket, watching her eyes dart past me to the empty street. "Can I come in?" She hesitated at her own doorway, her mother standing on the porch. Then she forced a smile that looked painful. "Of course, sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone." The house was dim inside. all curtains drawn despite the beautiful autumn afternoon. The air felt stale, trapped. Emily moved through the shadows like a ghost haunting her own life. Checking her watch every few minutes, we sat in the kitchen. She didn't eat the muffin I'd placed in front of her, just picked at it, crumbling it into smaller and smaller pieces. "Emily?" I reached across the table for her hand. She pulled it back too quickly. "What's going on? And please don't tell me you're tired." "I am tired, Mom. That's not a lie." Her voice cracked slightly. "My boss has been demanding, and David's been stressed about this big sale. And The front door opened. Emily went rigid. Every muscle in her body locked, and the color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. David's voice carried from the hallway, bright and cheerful. "Honey, I'm home early. Thought we could—" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and his smile didn't falter when he saw me. If anything, widened. "Margaret, what a wonderful surprise." "I brought muffins," I said, studying him. How thoughtful. He crossed the kitchen and kissed Emily's head. She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. His hand lingered on her shoulder, fingers pressing. "Emily, why didn't you tell me your mother was visiting?" "It was a surprise," I answered for her. David's pale eyes found mine. For just a moment, something cold swam in their depths. Then it vanished behind his perfect neighbor's smile. "Well, we're always happy to see you, aren't we, Emily?" "Yes." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I stayed another 20 minutes, making small talk that felt like chewing glass. David was attentive, solicitous, asking about my garden and Charlie, and whether I needed anything fixed around the house. The whole time, Emily sat silent, shrinking into her oversized sweater. As David walked me to the door, I noticed something that made my breath catch. Emily had pushed up her sleeves while picking at the muffin. On her left wrist, partially hidden, was a bruise. Dark purple, finger-shaped marks distinct against her pale skin. She caught me looking and yanked the sleeve down, eyes pleading. Don't say anything." "Drive safe, Margaret," David said, his hand on the small of my back guiding me out. "We'll have you over for dinner soon. I'll make my famous pot roast." I drove home in a daze, hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, at 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. I grabbed it, heart hammering. Emily's name lit up the screen. "Hello, Emily, sweetheart." Silence, but not empty silence. The kind filled with held breath and swallowed words. "Emily, are you there?" A whisper so quiet I almost missed it. "Mom, The line went dead. I called back immediately, straight to voicemail. Again, 23 times. I called her that night, and every single time it went to voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice a cruel mockery of the terrified whisper I'd just heard. I didn't sleep. I sat in Thomas's old armchair by the window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Charlie purring in my lap, and listened to my instincts scream what my heart didn't want to believe. My daughter was in danger, real, immediate danger, and her husband, the man everyone in Willow Creek trusted, admired, believed, was the one she needed protection from. By the time the sun fully rose, I'd made a decision. If Emily couldn't ask for help, I'd find another way. I'd watch, I'd wait, I'd protect her. Even if she didn't know I was there, I just didn't know that within 3 days, I'd be standing at Lake Juniper's edge, watching David Turner throw a suitcase into dark water, and that the sound that followed would haunt every dream I'd have for the rest of my life. Friday arrived wrapped in violence. The storm had been building all day, dark clouds massing over the mountains like an invading army. By evening, rain hammered against my windows with the fury of something alive and angry. Wind screamed through the pines, making them groan and crack, the kind of night that keeps sensible people indoors. Doors locked, curtains drawn. I was not sensible anymore. I was desperate. 3 days since that whispered phone call. 3 days of messages going unanswered, calls going straight to voicemail. I'd driven past Emily and David's house twice, curtains drawn, no movement, David's car in the driveway both times like a guard dog. Sleep had become impossible. I'd tried, lying in bed, counting sheep, counting breaths, counting the ways I'd failed to protect my daughter. Nothing worked. My mind spun with worst-case scenarios, each more terrible than the last. At 11:47 p.m., I gave up. I shuffled to the kitchen in my robe and made chamomile tea. I had no intention of drinking. Charlie watched me from his perch on the counter, green eyes knowing. "I'm losing my mind," I told him. "Aren't I?" He just blinked slowly, which could mean anything. I took my untouched tea to the porch. Rain cascaded off the roof in sheets, turning the world into a watercolor painting, bleeding at the edges. Lightning split the sky, and in that brief flash of illumination, I saw them. Headlights, distant, winding down the narrow road that led to Lake Juniper. At this hour, in this storm, no one went to the lake at midnight during a tempest. No one except people who needed darkness and isolation for things that couldn't stand daylight. My heart began to pound. I set down the tea with shaking hands and went inside, moving on autopilot. Raincoat, boots, flashlight, my phone, which I shoved in my pocket. I should call the police, I thought. Tell them, what? That I saw headlights and had a bad feeling. Instead, I went out into the storm. The trail to Lake Juniper was one I'd walked 1,000 times. First with Thomas when we were young and foolish, later with Emily when she was small and believed her mother knew everything. I knew every route that could trip you, every rock that could turn an ankle, but I'd never walked it at night, in a downpour, with fear pushing me forward like hands on my back. Rain soaked through my coat within minutes. The flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness, creating more shadows than it eliminated. Branches whipped my face, and mud sucked at my boots with each step. Thunder rolled overhead, like God rearranging furniture. I should turn back. This was insane. But my feet kept moving. The trees opened up near the shore. Lake Juniper stretched before me, surface roiling with rain, black as spilled ink. And there, parked dangerously close to the water's edge, was a vehicle I recognized, even through the storm's fury. David's silver sedan. I ducked behind a massive pine, heart threatening to break through my ribs. My flashlight was off now, but lightning provided sporadic illumination, turning the scene into a series of frozen photographs. Flash, David climbing out of the driver's seat, his normally perfect hair plastered to his skull. Flash, him looking left, then right, paranoid, checking for witnesses. Flash, the trunk popping open. Flash, David hauling out a large, dark suitcase, heavy. From the way he struggled with it, I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. This was it. This was the moment that would split my life into before and after. David carried the suitcase to the very edge of the water. For a moment he just stood there, rain hammering down on him. Then, with a grunt of effort, he swung it back and hurled it forward. The splash echoed across the lake despite the storm's noise. But then, God help me, I heard something else, a sound that would replay in my nightmares forever. A muffled cry, almost like a moan, coming from inside the suitcase as it hit the water. Human, unmistakably, horrifyingly human. My knees buckled. I grabbed the tree trunk to keep from falling. David stood frozen, staring at the spot where the suitcase had disappeared. The rain ran down his face like tears he didn't have. Then he moved, fast, purposeful, climbing back into his car. The engine roared to life. Headlights swept across the shore, and I pressed myself flat against the tree, not breathing, not moving, not existing. The car peeled out, tires spitting mud and gravel, and then he was gone. I waited, counted to 60, then to 60 again. The storm continued its assault, but I barely felt it anymore. Everything had gone numb except the screaming in my head. Someone was in that suitcase. Someone alive. Emily! The name broke something in me. I burst from behind the tree and ran to the water's edge, flashlight beam sweeping frantically across the churning surface. Emily! I screamed into the storm. Emily! There, maybe 20 feet out. Something dark bobbed in the water, the suitcase. It hadn't sunk, thank God, thank God, I didn't think. I waded in, gasping as freezing water hit my thighs, my waist. The current pulled at me, trying to drag me deeper, but I fought it. Branches had snagged the suitcase, holding it partially afloat near the shore. My fingers closed around the handle. I pulled, using strength I didn't know I had, dragging it back toward land. It was so heavy, too heavy. Finally, my feet found solid ground again. I hauled the suitcase onto the muddy bank and fell to my knees beside it. Chest heaving, the clasps were jammed. I beat at them with my flashlight. With a rock I grabbed from the shore, with every ounce of desperation in my body. "Hold on, baby, hold on, Mommy's here." The clasps finally gave way. I threw open the lid, ready for blood, for Emily's pale face, for the worst thing I'd ever see. Instead, I found something that made no sense. A baby doll. Plastic, old, wrapped carefully in yellowed hospital blankets. Photographs, torn and burned at the edges, of Emily, dozens of them, and a note, ink running from the rain, but still legible in my daughter's handwriting. "If something happens to me, don't look for me. David isn't who you think he is. Take care of yourself, Mom. I love you." I read it 3 times before the words penetrated. Then I held it to my chest and sobbed into the storm, rain mixing with tears. While Lake Juniper kept its secrets and the darkness pressed in from all sides, I don't remember getting home. One moment I was on the lake shore, clutching Emily's note with trembling hands, and the next I was standing in my kitchen, soaked to the bone, leaving muddy footprints across the linoleum. Charlie meowed frantically, weaving between my legs, sensing something terrible had shifted in our small world. The suitcase sat on my table like an accusation. I dragged it back with me. Evidence, I thought, though of what I wasn't sure. Not murder. There was no body, no blood, just a doll wrapped like an infant, photographs of my daughter destroyed with methodical rage, and a note that read like a goodbye letter. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I made coffee. I wouldn't drink. 3 a.m. had become 4, then 5. Gray dawn light crept through the windows, making the kitchen look haunted. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call the police. Put it down a dozen times. What would I tell them? My son-in-law threw a suitcase in the lake. Inside was a doll and some photos. Yes, I know how that sounds. No, I don't know where my daughter is. No, he hasn't technically done anything illegal. They'd think I was a paranoid old woman who'd read too many mystery novels. At 6:30, my phone rang. I nearly threw it across the room. David's name on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings, 4 before answering. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Hello. Margaret, did I wake you?" He sounded cheerful, normal, like a man who hadn't been throwing luggage into lakes at midnight. "I'm so sorry to call early, but I wanted to catch you before you started your day." "What is it, David?" I watched my reflection in the dark window. A woman who looked 20 years older than yesterday. "It's about Emily. She got a call last night from her college roommate, Sarah, the one in Seattle. Apparently Sarah's going through a rough divorce and needed support. Emily left around 9 p.m. to drive up there. You know how she is, always helping people." He laughed, warm and affectionate. "She forgot to tell me to let you know. And I just realized you might worry if you tried calling her." The lie was smooth as silk. Practiced. "Seattle," I repeated. "She'll probably be gone a few days, maybe a week. I told her to take all the time Sarah needs. Marriage troubles are so difficult." A pause. "Are you all right? Margaret, you sound tired." "I didn't sleep well, the storm. Wasn't it something? I barely slept myself." Another lie, effortless. "Listen, I'm heading out of town this morning for a property viewing in Portland, but I'll be back tomorrow. Why don't I bring you dinner? We can keep each other company while Emily's playing therapist." Every cell in my body screamed to refuse, but I heard myself say, "That sounds nice. David, thank you." "Wonderful. I'll bring that pot roast I promised. See you around 6 tomorrow." 6 is perfect. After he hung up, I ran to the bathroom and vomited. The police station opened at 8. I was there at 8:03. Emily's note sealed in a plastic bag. Determination replacing fear. Deputy Williams, I'd known his mother in high school, listened to my story with kind, patient eyes that grew increasingly skeptical with each word. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Mrs. Collins, I understand you're concerned about Emily, but what exactly are you reporting? Your son-in-law disposed of some personal items in the lake. That's not illegal, though it's not great for the environment." He smiled gently. "The note is concerning, sure, but it doesn't mention any specific threat. And Emily's an adult. She can travel without checking in with everyone. She didn't go to Seattle." "He's lying. Do you have proof of that?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "No. Look, Mrs. Collins." He leaned forward, voice kind but firm. "I see this a lot. Adult children pull away sometimes. especially from parents. It hurts, but it's not a crime. And sometimes we don't like our children's spouses, but that doesn't make them dangerous. Unless Emily files a complaint or you have evidence of actual wrongdoing. She called me 3 nights ago, just whispered my name, and the line went dead. Could have been a butt dial. Bad connection. He stood, clearly considering the conversation over. If Emily doesn't contact you in a week, come back. We can do a welfare check. But right now, my hands are tied. No crime has been committed. I left feeling smaller than when I'd arrived. The next 24 hours crawled. I tried Emily's number every hour. Straight to voicemail. I drove past her house. Dark, empty. David's car gone like he'd said. I even called the Seattle number for her old roommate Sarah, a number I'd found in an ancient address book. A man answered, "Sarah? No. She moved to Denver 3 years ago after the divorce. Lost touch after that." Another lie. Another thread unraveling. When David showed up Saturday evening with flowers and a pot roast that smelled like Sunday dinners and normalcy, I let him in. He kissed my cheek, set the table, poured wine, and talked about property values and interest rates and how much he missed Emily already. I watched him across my kitchen table. This man who'd married my daughter, who everyone loved, who brought me flowers and made me dinner, and saw a monster wearing a human suit, his eyes pale as winter ice, met mine over the wine glasses. "You look tired, Margaret. Are you sleeping okay?" "Fine," I lied, matching his fiction with my own. "Just worried about Emily. She's fine. Called me this afternoon." Another lie, smooth as glass. "Said to tell you she loves you and she'll call soon." "That's good to hear." We smiled at each other. 2 people playing chess with invisible pieces, and I understood with crystal clarity. He knew I'd been at the lake. Maybe he'd seen me. Maybe he just suspected, but he knew. And this dinner, this cheerful, normal, neighborly dinner, was a warning after he left. I locked every door, checked every window, and sat in Thomas's chair with the lights off, watching shadows move across the ceiling. Emily's note was hidden in my bedroom, tucked inside the Bible Thomas had given me on our wedding day. The suitcase was in my basement, covered with old sheets, evidence I couldn't use, proof of nothing, but I wasn't giving up. Mothers don't give up on their daughters. If the police wouldn't help, I'd find another way. I just needed to know where to start looking, and every instinct told me the answer was in Emily's past, in the pieces of her life I'd never fully understood. Starting tomorrow, I'd become an archaeologist of my daughter's secrets, and God help David Turner. If I found what I suspected was buried there, Emily's childhood bedroom had remained mostly unchanged since she moved out at 23. I'd kept it that way deliberately, a shrine to normalcy, to the time before David, before secrets, before everything went wrong. Her old twin bed still wore the lavender quilt her grandmother had sewn. Stuffed animals lined the window seat. Participation trophies from soccer and debate club gathered dust on shelves alongside worn paperbacks and yearbooks. A room frozen in time, waiting for a daughter who might never come back. Monday morning, I stood in the doorway with fresh coffee and old fears, staring at the space like it might give me answers. David had texted earlier. "Still in Portland. Extended my trip. Don't worry about dinner. Take care of yourself, Margaret." The false concern made my skin crawl, but it also meant I had time to search without worrying about him appearing unannounced at my door with more flowers and lies. I started methodically top drawer of her dresser, old sweaters and scarves, nothing hidden. Second drawer, journals from middle school, filled with the typical anxieties of 13-year-olds worried about algebra and first crushes. Nothing useful. Hours passed. I went through her closet, felt inside coat pockets, checked shoeboxes that held exactly what they claimed. Shoes. I examined every book on her shelves, shaking them for loose papers. I checked under the mattress, behind picture frames, inside the heating vent. Nothing, nothing, nothing. By 3 p.m. I was ready to scream. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Emily really had gone to help a friend, and I was just a paranoid widow seeing shadows where there were none. No, I knew what I'd seen at the lake. I knew David was lying. I sat on Emily's bed, defeated, and my eyes fell on the old Bible resting on her nightstand. Leather-bound, gilt-edged pages, given to her at her first communion when she was 8. She'd carried it to church every Sunday for years, carefully recording the dates of every service in the front cover. I picked it up more from habit than hope. It fell open naturally to Psalms. She'd always loved Psalms. The pages were worn soft from reading, verses underlined in fading blue ink. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Something small and metallic slipped from between the pages and fell onto the quilt. A key, tiny silver, old-fashioned, not a modern key for a modern lock, but the kind that might open a jewelry box or a diary or... My breath caught. When Emily was 16, Thomas had built a false panel behind her wardrobe. Every young woman needs a place for treasures, he'd said, winking at her. Secret things that are only hers. I'd forgotten about it completely. I moved to the heavy wooden wardrobe, an antique that had belonged to Thomas's mother. It took all my strength to slide it away from the wall. Inch by grinding inch, behind it, barely visible in the shadows, was a small door cut into the plaster. The keyhole was tiny, brass, barely noticeable. The silver key fit perfectly. The panel swung open on silent hinges, revealing a space no bigger than a shoebox. Inside, protected by darkness and secrecy, was a battered cardboard box. My hands shook as I lifted it out and carried it to the bed. The flaps weren't taped, just folded shut, like she'd opened and closed it many times, like she'd visited these memories often. Inside were pieces of a life I'd never known about, photographs, dozens of them, Emily smiling wider than I'd seen her smile in years, wrapped in the arms of a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that fell over his forehead, and a beard that was more scruff than intention. His eyes crinkled when he smiled, genuine warmth radiating from the images in every photo. They looked complete, like two halves of something whole. There were letters too, handwritten on lined notebook paper, the ink slightly smudged in places, as if he'd rested his hand on wet words while writing. I unfolded one, reading words that felt too intimate, too private. Mahim, 3 weeks since I last held you, and it feels like 3 years. I know we agreed this was safer, keeping distance while things settle. But God, I miss you. I miss your laugh. I miss how you steal all the blankets and then complain you're cold. I miss arguing with you about whether book endings are better than movie endings. Books win. Always, and you know it. One day we won't have to hide anymore. One day I'll wake up next to you legally, properly, permanently. Until then, I'm yours. Always, completely, impossibly yours. Michael. Michael. The name hit me like cold water. Michael Green, Emily's boyfriend from... When was it, 7, 8 years ago? They dated for over a year. She'd been so happy bringing him to Sunday dinners, talking about him constantly. He'd been polite, quiet, worked with his hands as a carpenter. I'd liked him. Then suddenly he was gone. Emily showed up at my door one night, tear-streaked and devastated, saying he'd left without explanation. Just disappeared. No note, no call, nothing. David had appeared a few weeks later, attentive, comforting, exactly what a broken-hearted woman needed. They were married within a year. I thought it was rebound love that grew into something real. I thought Emily had moved on. But these letters, some were dated from just 18 months ago, long after her marriage to David. They'd found each other again. With trembling fingers, I lifted a silver necklace from the box, a delicate chain with a small pendant engraved with a single letter, M on the back, smaller script. Always. I sat there, surrounded by evidence of Emily's secret love, and understood this was what David couldn't tolerate. This was why the suitcase at the lake, why Emily's terror, why everything felt wrong. David had discovered that Emily was still in love with someone else. Maybe she'd asked for a divorce. Maybe she'd just been caught visiting Michael. Either way, David's carefully constructed perfect life had cracked, and he'd done something unforgivable. But what? Where was Emily now? Where was Michael? I gathered everything carefully, placed it back in the box, and locked it away again. Then I pulled out my phone and Googled Michael Green, Willow Creek, Oregon. Nothing useful. Too many Michael Greens in the world. I tried Michael Green, Carpenter, Oregon. Still too many results. Then I remembered. Thomas's old friend Robert Chen worked at the county records office. If anyone could find paper trails that the internet couldn't, It was Robert, I called him, not caring that it was nearly 5 p.m. on a Monday. Robert, it's Margaret Collins. I need your help with something, and I need you not to ask too many questions. There was a pause, then, does this have to do with why you looked like death warmed over at the grocery store last week? Yes. Come by tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. I'll make coffee. After we hung up, I sat in Emily's room as shadows lengthened and daylight died, holding the box of secrets on my lap. Somewhere out there, my daughter was hiding, or being hidden, and somewhere, Michael Green existed under a different name, maybe not knowing Emily was in danger, or maybe he was in danger too. Or worse, I thought again of that sound at the lake, the muffled cry from inside the suitcase. I'd assumed it was alive, human, Emily. But what if it had been a recording? What if the doll and photos were symbolic? What if David had already done something terrible to Michael, and the suitcase was his way of showing Emily what happened to people who tried to take what belonged to him? The thought made me physically ill. Tomorrow I'd find Michael Green. I'd follow every lead, turn over every stone, and pull every thread until the truth unraveled completely, because one thing was absolutely certain. David Turner was not the man he pretended to be, and the secrets he was keeping would destroy us all if I didn't act fast. The lake held answers. I was sure of it, and I was going back. Robert Chen's office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. Exactly as I remembered, he'd worked at the county records office for 32 years, navigating the transition from filing cabinets to databases with the patience of someone who genuinely loved bureaucracy. His desk was organized chaos, stacks of folders, 3 computer monitors, and a dying ficus plant that had survived more administrations than either of us cared to count. He looked up when I entered at 8 sharp, dark eyes assessing my face with the careful attention of a friend who knew when not to ask certain questions. You look terrible, Margaret. Thank you, Robert. You're a true gentleman, ma'am. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Coffee's fresh. Sit. Tell me what you need. I sat, accepting the chipped mug he handed me. The coffee was terrible, burned and bitter, but I drank it anyway, needing the heat, the caffeine, the ritual of normalcy before diving into abnormality. I need you to find someone, Michael Green. He would have lived in or around Willow Creek about 7-8 years ago. He was a carpenter, early 30s, dated my daughter Emily. Robert's fingers were already moving across his keyboard. Spell the last name. Grene. Keys clicked. Minutes passed. His expression shifted from neutral to confused to deeply troubled. That's odd. My heart rate picked up. What's odd? Michael Aaron Green, born May 15, 1989, lived at 447 Riverside Avenue from 2015 to 2017. Worked for Cascade Custom Carpentry. More clicking. Then his file just stops. No forwarding address. No death certificate. No marriage license. No property purchases. Nothing. It's like he ceased to exist in August 2017. People don't just disappear from records. No, they don't unless... Robert leaned back, frowning at his screens. Unless someone erased them, or they entered witness protection, or they died and someone buried the paperwork. But none of those things happen by accident. Margaret, can you dig deeper? I can try, but I'll need to access some databases I'm not technically supposed to. He saw my face and sighed. Give me 20 minutes. I spent those 20 minutes wearing a path in his carpet, drinking terrible coffee, and watching the clock tick like it was counting down to something inevitable. Finally, Robert made a small sound of triumph. Got something. Hospital records. Michael Green was admitted to Mercy General in September 2017. Serious car accident on Highway 20, multiple injuries, coma for 6 weeks. Did he recover? According to this, yes. Discharged in November 2017 to rehabilitation facility. But here's where it gets weird. He pulled up another screen. The insurance claim for that accident was processed by Turner Insurance Solutions. That's David's company, right? My mouth went dry. Yes, and the rehabilitation facility he was transferred to. It doesn't exist anymore. Closed down in 2018 under suspicious circumstances. Something about fraudulent billing, and after Michael left that facility, His identity was legally changed through a court order sealed for victim protection. Changed to what? That I can't access. Sealed records require a court order to unseal. He looked at me seriously. Margaret, what's going on? This isn't just a curious mother checking on an old boyfriend, I told him. Not everything. Not the lake, not the suitcase, but enough. Emily's distance, David's lies, the feeling that something terrible was happening and no one would help. When I finished, Robert was quiet for a long moment, then, let me make some calls. I have a friend who works at the State Rehabilitation Licensing Board. If Michael went to rehab, there might be transfer records somewhere. While he made calls, I stared at the information on his screen. David had processed Michael's insurance claim. David had been involved in Michael's care. His disappearance, his entire transformation into someone else. That wasn't coincidence. That was orchestration. Robert hung up and grabbed his jacket. Come on, we're taking a drive. Where? To talk to someone who might remember Michael Green. An hour later, we stood outside a small house in Cedar Mills, a town 30 minutes from Willow Creek. The elderly man who answered the door, Mr. Harold Finch, according to Robert's notes, squinted at us with watery blue eyes. Help you. Mr. Finch, I'm sorry to bother you, but we're looking for information about a former tenant. Michael Green. He rented your garage apartment about 6 years ago. Recognition flickered. Michael, good kid, quiet, paid rent on time, kept to himself mostly. Then he just left in the middle of the night. Left all his tools, his clothes, everything, strangest thing. Do you remember when exactly? Let's see. Would have been early 2019, yeah. February or March. I remember because we still had snow on the ground. He scratched his chin. Thing is, couple months before he left, he started having a visitor, a woman, pretty blonde thing. They seemed real happy together. I figured maybe he was moving in with her. My pulse quickened. Can you describe her? Tallish, thin, always wore this little silver necklace, had a sad look about her, even when she smiled. But when she was with Michael, she lit up like Christmas. Emily, that was Emily. Did Michael leave any forwarding information? No, but he came back once, about 2 weeks after he disappeared. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. I heard him in the apartment moving around, then he left again. Never saw him after that. Mr. Finch's expression darkened. But I'll tell you something strange. Week after that, some guy in a fancy suit showed up asking questions about Michael. Real pushy about it. Wanted to know where he went, if he'd left anything behind, who his friends were. Do you remember what he looked like? Youngish, maybe 40, good-looking in that plastic kind of way, light eyes. Smiled a lot, but it never reached those eyes. Made my skin crawl, to be honest. David. I thanked Mr. Finch and walked back to Robert's car on legs that barely held me. That was David, I said once we were inside. He was hunting Michael. It looks that way. Robert started the car, but didn't drive yet. Margaret, I think David did something to Michael. Maybe not killed him, but something. And if Emily found out, or if she tried to leave David for Michael. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew who could help make sense of this, who had resources I didn't. Henry Walker, the investigative journalist who'd done that exposé on the hospital baby-selling scandal years ago. His voice was gruff when he answered, Henry Walker. Mr. Walker, my name is Margaret Collins. I need your help. It's about a missing person, possible foul play, and a story that I think you'll want to write. There was a pause, then, I'm listening. I told him everything. When I finished, he was silent for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, meet me at the Blue Heron Cafe in an hour. Bring everything you have. This story might be bigger than you realize. Mrs. Collins. As Robert drove me back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from David. Coming home tonight, dinner tomorrow. I miss our talks. I stared at those words. Friendly, normal, innocent, and felt ice in my veins. He was circling back, checking on me, making sure I wasn't causing problems. Well, I was about to cause the biggest problem of his life, because I knew now what he'd done to Michael, and I was going to prove it, and then I was going to make him tell me where Emily was, even if I had to tear his perfect facade apart piece by piece to do it. Henry Walker was not what I expected. I'd imagined someone polished, suited, the kind of journalist you see on television. Instead, the man who stood when I entered the Blue Heron Cafe was rumpled and real. 50s, gray-haired, wearing a flannel shirt with coffee stains, and eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. "Mrs. Collins." His handshake was firm. "Sit, talk." For the next 2 hours, I laid it all out. The lake, the suitcase, Emily's note, Michael's disappearance, David's lies, the hospital scandal from decades ago that Henry had exposed. Everything. He took notes in a battered notebook, occasionally stopping me to clarify details, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back, studying me. "You realize what you're suggesting? That David Turner, respected businessman, pillar of the community, orchestrated the disappearance of his wife's former lover, possibly killed him, and is now holding his wife hostage or worse. I know how it sounds. It sounds like a crime novel." He leaned forward. "But I believe you. I've been a journalist for 30 years. Mrs. Collins, I've learned to trust my gut, and everything you've told me fits a pattern I've seen before. Controlling men who can't accept rejection, who'd rather destroy what they can't possess." Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone who believed me. "The question is," Henry continued, "how do we prove it? We need evidence. Real, concrete, undeniable evidence, and I think I know where to find it." "Where?" "The lake." He tapped his pen against his notebook. "You said you found one suitcase. David wouldn't have gone to all that trouble for just one. Men like him, they're methodical. If he's hiding something, really hiding it, there's more down there." The thought made me queasy. "You think there's a body? I think there's evidence of one, or of what he did, or of where they are. Something." He closed his notebook. "I have a friend, Hank Morrison, retired fisherman, knows Lake Juniper better than anyone alive. If there's something down there, he can help us find it." 2 days later, on a gray Wednesday afternoon that threatened rain but never delivered, I stood once again at the edge of Lake Juniper. This time I wasn't alone. Hank Morrison was 70 if he was a day, weathered brown as driftwood, with hands that knew water and boats and secrets kept below surfaces. He didn't ask many questions, just nodded when Henry explained we were looking for something specific. "Lake's got deep spots," Hank said, loading his boat with equipment I didn't understand. Hooks, grappling lines, sonar equipment that looked older than me. Couple places down there you could hide a car and nobody'd find it for decades. But if you've got a general location, there. I pointed to the spot where I'd seen David. That's where he threw the first one. Hank studied the shoreline, the angle of the trees, the way water moved. Current's tricky there, pulls everything northeast toward the deepest part. If there's something down there, it's probably 40, 50 feet from where it went in. We spent 4 hours on that boat. Hank worked methodically, running his grappling hooks along the bottom, occasionally pulling up tree branches, old tires, the detritus of years of people treating the lake like a dumping ground. Henry kept me company, telling stories about his career, asking gentle questions about Emily's childhood, keeping me from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Then Hank made a sound. "Got something heavy?" My heart stopped. Together Hank and Henry pulled on the line. I watched the water barely breathing as something dark broke the surface. Another suitcase, smaller than the first, covered in algae and slime. We hauled it into the boat. Water sluiced off its sides. The smell was mud and decay, and secrets fermenting in darkness. "You want to open it?" Hank asked quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. The clasps were corroded but gave way with effort. Henry helped me pry them open. Then we lifted the lid together. Inside, protected by plastic bags that had somehow stayed sealed, were items that made the world tilt sideways. A music box, antique, broken, but when I wound it, a distorted melody played. Something I recognized but couldn't place. A man's wedding ring, gold band with initials engraved inside. EMG photographs, old, faded, showing a young couple holding an infant. The woman looked happy, exhausted, the way all new mothers look. The man gazed at the baby with wonder, and underneath everything, sealed in its own plastic bag, a document so old it was yellowing at the edges. A birth certificate. Henry pulled it out carefully, unfolding it with the reverence of someone who understood he was holding dynamite. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. I looked over his shoulder and felt the earth disappear beneath my feet. Certificate of live birth name, Michael Thomas Green. Date of birth, May 15, 1989, place of birth, Mercy General Hospital, Willow Creek, Oregon mother, Margaret Ann Collins father, Thomas Edward Collins. The boat rocked. Or maybe that was me, the world spinning, reality fracturing. Margaret, Margaret, sit down. Henry's hands on my shoulders, guiding me to the bench seat. Breathe, just breathe. But I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing. Michael Green was my son, the baby the hospital said was stillborn, the child I'd mourned for 35 years, the loss that had haunted every mother's day, every birthday, every Christmas. He'd been alive, all along. He'd been alive, and I'd never known. I don't understand, I heard myself say. They told us he died. They said there were complications, and he was born dead, and we never even got to see him properly. Just for a moment before they took him away. The hospital scandal, Henry said softly. Jesus, Margaret, you were one of the victims. They sold your baby. I was going to be sick. Hank steered the boat toward shore while I retched over the side, bringing up nothing but bile and horror. When we reached land, I sat on a rock with my head between my knees while Henry pieced it together from the documents. Michael was adopted through illegal channels by Frank and Patricia Green. They raised him as their own until they died in a car accident when he was 8. Then his uncle took over, kept the Green name. Michael probably never knew he was adopted. And Emily, I whispered. Emily fell in love with him, her own. I couldn't say it. The relationship was too complicated, too terrible. Half-siblings who'd never known, an uncle and niece who'd found love in ignorance. Does David know? I asked. About the connection. Henry was looking at something else he'd pulled from the suitcase. A folder of documents, newspaper clippings. Based on these, yes, he knows everything. Look. He spread them out on the rock. Articles about the hospital scandal from years ago. Medical records showing Michael had been treated at Mercy General, the same hospital, insurance documents with David's company letterhead, and at the bottom, a handwritten note on David's distinctive script. Family trees are funny things. Prune the wrong branch and the whole thing collapses. Better to burn it all down and start fresh. He knows, Henry said. He figured it out, probably when he was processing Michael's insurance claim after the accident, had access to his medical history, his original birth records, and when he discovered Emily and Michael were reconnecting, he didn't finish. But I understood. David couldn't let the truth come out, couldn't let Emily leave him for her biological uncle, couldn't handle the scandal, the shame, the loss of control, so he'd done something unforgivable. Where's Michael now? I asked. Is he dead? I don't think so. If David had killed him, he wouldn't have just hidden these things. He would have destroyed them completely. Henry gathered the evidence carefully. I think David's holding this over them both. Insurance policy. If Emily tries to leave, he exposes the relationship. If Michael comes forward, same thing. He's trapped them both with the truth. I thought of Emily's note. David isn't who you think he is. She'd been trying to warn me about so much more than I'd understood. We need to go to the police now, I said, standing on shaky legs, with this evidence, and tell them what? That you found a birth certificate in the lake, proving your long-lost son is your son-in-law's romantic rival. That this proves David is dangerous. Henry shook his head. They'll say the birth certificate doesn't prove current crime, that the hospital scandal is old news. We need more. Then what do? Henry looked at me with something like pity. We make David confess. We force him to show his hand, and we pray that when he does, Emily and Michael are still alive to save. Henry's apartment was chaos, organized by obsession. Every wall covered in papers, photographs, news clippings connected by red string like a detective's fever dream. His dining table disappeared under stacks of files, coffee cups multiplied on every surface. This was where stories came to be born or die, and I prayed ours was the former. Sit, he commanded, already pulling up files on his laptop. We're going deep, and it's going to get ugly. For the next 6 hours, Henry Walker showed me what real investigative journalism looked like. He started with the hospital scandal from 1989, the year Michael was born. Mercy General had been implicated in selling at least 17 babies to wealthy families who couldn't conceive. The scheme ran for almost a decade before a nurse's conscience broke and she went public. I wrote the original expose, Henry said, pulling up archived articles. Ruined several careers, closed the hospital's maternity ward permanently, but we never found all the babies. Some families disappeared, changed names, moved states. The records were deliberately destroyed. Michael was one of them. Michael was one of them. He clicked through database after database. Now watch this. I'm cross-referencing adoption records, public and sealed, with property records, marriage licenses, death certificates. His fingers flew across keys. Names and dates cascaded down screens. Then he stopped. Got them, Frank and Patricia Turner. Wealthy couple. Lived in Portland. Couldn't have children. And in 1989, they legally adopted a son, David Jonathan Turner, born April 3, 1989. My heart began to race. The same year. But here's where it gets interesting. More clicking. 6 months later, the same couple registered a second son, Michael Aaron, born May 15, 1989. But this one wasn't through normal adoption channels. This was a home birth registration filed through a midwife who conveniently died in 1995. They bought Michael just like they bought David. Exactly 2 babies in 6 months, both through questionable means. They raised them as brothers until, he pulled up another file, until 1997, when Frank and Patricia died in a car accident on I-5. David, age 8, went to Patricia's sister in Portland. Michael went to Frank's brother, Martin Green, who lived in Seattle. They were separated, and Martin Green, probably trying to protect Michael or maybe just wanting a fresh start, officially changed the boy's last name to Green, dropped the Turner connection entirely. Michael grew up not knowing he had a brother. I tried to imagine it. 2 boys raised together for 8 years, then torn apart by tragedy. David going to wealthy relatives who maintained his lifestyle. Michael going to a working-class uncle who did his best but struggled. Did David know, I asked, about being adopted? Henry pulled up a document that made my blood run cold. Patricia Turner's will. There's a provision that David was to be told about his adoption on his 18th birthday. Along with the truth about the hospital scandal, the will specifically mentions that he was one of the Mercy babies and that he had a brother who was also adopted. So he's known for 20 years. Known and clearly obsessed. Look at this. Henry showed me browser history he'd somehow obtained from David's old computer. He didn't explain how. Years of searching for Michael Green, tracking his movements, his jobs, his relationships. David knew where Michael was the entire time, but never made contact. Just watched, like a predator studying prey. Then Emily entered the picture, I said. Then Emily entered the picture. She meets Michael around 2015. They date seriously for over a year around this time. He pulled up more records. David moves to Willow Creek, starts working as a realtor, joins Emily's church, just happens to be there when Michael suddenly disappears after that convenient car accident in September 2017. David caused the accident. Can't prove it, but I'd bet my career on it. Michael's car was found wrapped around a tree on Highway 20. No witnesses. Police ruled it loss of control due to wet roads, but the investigating officer noted in his report that the brake lines looked suspiciously clean, like they'd been cut, and then the car had been wiped down. I felt sick. He tried to kill him. Failed. Then used the hospitalization to control the situation. David's insurance company processed all the claims. David arranged the rehabilitation facility, which, remember, was shut down for fraud. David basically disappeared Michael legally while he was vulnerable and recovering. And Emily. David swept in while she was grieving, played the perfect supportive friend. They married in 2018. Henry's expression darkened. He won, he got the girl, got rid of the competition, got the perfect life he'd always been denied. Until they found each other again. Henry pulled up the final piece. 18 months ago, Michael, now living under the name Marcus Green in Cedar Mills, somehow crossed paths with Emily again. Maybe at a farmer's market, maybe by pure chance. But they reconnected, and this time they were careful. The secret meetings, the hidden photos, the letters stored behind false walls, a love that had to hide because it was dangerous. When did David find out? Based on timeline, About 4 months ago, look, Henry showed me credit card records he absolutely shouldn't have had access to. David hired a private investigator in June. By July, he knew everything. Knew Emily was seeing Michael. Knew they were planning something, probably to run away together. And when he investigated further, I whispered, when he investigated further, he discovered the impossible truth. Henry pulled up the final document. Medical records, DNA comparisons, family tree charts that David had meticulously constructed. That Michael Green, his adopted brother, was also Margaret Collins's biological son. That Emily Collins Turner was therefore Michael's biological half-niece. That the woman he'd married and the brother he'd destroyed were connected by blood and didn't even know it. The room spun. This conspiracy went deeper than I'd imagined. Generations deep, tangled in lies and stolen babies and fate's cruel sense of humor. He couldn't let them be together, I said. Not just because he'd lose Emily, but because if the truth came out, everything would be exposed. The illegal adoption, the attempted murder, the fact that he'd knowingly let Emily fall in love with her own uncle. The scandal would destroy him completely. Henry stood, pacing now. So he did what he always does. He controlled the situation. He's holding this truth over both of them. Probably threatened to expose their relationship publicly if either one tries to leave or talk. It's perfect blackmail. Where are they? I demanded. Where is he keeping them? That's what we need to find out. He grabbed his jacket. And I know how. David's been making cash withdrawals, large ones, paying for something off the books, somewhere remote, somewhere he can control access. He pulled up property records. David's company has sold hundreds of houses, but 6 months ago, one sale fell through right before closing. A cabin property 20 miles north of here, completely isolated. The buyer backed out, but the property stayed off market, never relisted. You think he's keeping them there? I think it's our best lead. Henry grabbed his keys. And I think we need to check it out before David realizes we're closing in. My phone buzzed. Text from David. Tomorrow, dinner at your place. I'll bring wine. We need to talk about Emily. The casual threat in those words made my hands shake. He knows, I whispered. He knows we're investigating. Maybe, or maybe he's just checking in, making sure you're staying quiet. Henry's jaw set. Either way, we're running out of time. If we're going to save them, it has to be tonight. I thought of Emily's note. If something happens to me, don't look for me. But I was her mother. Looking for her was the only thing I knew how to do. Let's go, I said. Let's end this. I went alone. Henry argued against it for an hour, but I was firm. David would never talk if he felt cornered by strangers. He'd lawyer up, deny everything, and Emily and Michael would disappear forever, if they weren't already gone. But he might talk to me. Mother-in-law to monster. One final conversation before everything burned. At least wear this, Henry said, clipping a small device to my collar. Audio recorder if he confesses anything. We'll have evidence, and if he notices it, tell him it's a medical alert button. You're an elderly widow living alone. It's believable. I didn't argue with elderly. I felt ancient, worn down by truths that should have stayed buried. The drive to David and Emily's house took 20 minutes. Every traffic light felt like a countdown. Every turn brought me closer to answers. I wasn't sure I wanted. David's car sat in the driveway, his silver sedan. The one I'd seen at the lake in the fading evening light. It looked predatory, like a shark sleeping in shallow water. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, gathering courage from memory. Emily as a baby, Emily's first steps, Emily's graduation, Emily's wedding day. When I'd smiled and pretended I wasn't terrified by the coldness in her groom's eyes, I should have listened to my instincts then. I wouldn't ignore them now. The doorbell's chime echoed too loudly. Footsteps approached. The door opened. David smiled his perfect smile. Margaret, I thought we were meeting tomorrow. I couldn't wait. I held up the basket I'd brought, the same one I'd carried muffins in months ago. I made Emily's favorite cookies. Thought maybe if I brought them, you'd tell me where she really is. The smile didn't falter, but something flickered in those pale eyes. Calculation. I told you. Don't. My voice came out stronger than I felt. Don't lie to me again, David. Please, I'm tired of lies. For a long moment we stood in the doorway, studying each other. Then he stepped aside. Come in. The house was immaculate. No dishes in the sink, no shoes by the door, no sign that anyone actually lived here. It looked like a staged property, which I supposed it was. David's stage, where he performed the role of devoted husband. Coffee, he offered. No, thank you. Sit, at least. I sat on the couch. He chose the armchair across from me. Posture relaxed, but his hands gripped the armrests too tightly. I know about Michael, I said. His expression didn't change. Michael Green, Emily's old boyfriend, what about him? I know he didn't just disappear. I know about the accident. I know about the insurance claims you processed. I know you've been tracking him for years. That's quite a conspiracy theory, Margaret. I know your brothers. Now his mask cracked, just slightly, like hairline fractures in ice. Excuse me, adopted brothers, raised together until you were 8, then separated after your parents died. You went to live with your aunt. He went to live with his uncle and took the name Green. David's jaw tightened. You've been busy. I know Emily and Michael found each other again. I know you discovered their relationship and couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle what? My wife cheating on me? I think that's pretty reasonable, Margaret. I pulled out the photograph from the suitcase at the lake, the one of young Frank and Patricia Turner holding an infant. I laid it on the coffee table between us. I know about the birth certificate. I know Michael is my son. The room went silent. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. David stared at the photograph. When he looked up, the mask was completely gone. What remained was something cold and terrible. So you figured it out. His voice had lost its warmth, become flat, mechanical. I wondered if you would. Wondered if Emily had told you before. Before what, David? Before you killed her? Killed? He laughed, sharp and bitter. I didn't kill anyone, Margaret. I'm not a murderer. I'm a problem solver. Where is my daughter? He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkening sky. Do you know what it's like to lose everything twice? I was born to one set of parents who gave me away like I was nothing. Then I was bought by parents who loved me, really loved me, and I lost them too. For 8 years, I had a brother, someone who was supposed to be permanent. Then he was gone, torn away, and I grew up knowing that family is temporary, that love is conditional, that everything can be stolen. David. Then I met Emily. He turned, eyes glittering. Beautiful, kind, broken-hearted because some carpenter had abandoned her. And I saw an opportunity. I could be what she needed. I could build something permanent. So I did. I became perfect for her. Perfect husband, perfect provider, perfect life. By destroying Michael, by removing an obstacle. He said it so casually, like he was discussing removing a tree stump. The car accident was supposed to be fatal. It wasn't, but it worked out. I could control his recovery, his identity, his whole existence. He became Marcus Green, living quietly, safely away from Emily, until they found each other again. Until they found each other again, he echoed, anger creeping into his voice. Do you know what that felt like? Watching my wife fall in love with the brother who was stolen from me, watching her plan to leave me for him. So you investigated, found out the truth about his birth. I found out the truth about a lot of things. He pulled a folder from a drawer. I hadn't even seen him move, and threw it on the table. Inside were documents, DNA results, family trees drawn in obsessive detail. I found out that Michael Green was really Michael Collins, your son, the baby you thought died, the baby stolen and sold to my parents. We're family, I whispered. We're a cosmic joke. He slammed his hand on the table, the first crack in his controlled facade. Don't you see? Michael was always supposed to be my brother, but through adoption, instead he became my brother-in-law through Emily. And then I discovered he's actually your son, making him Emily's uncle. The whole thing is a twisted, impossible mess that should never have happened. Where are they, David? Where are Emily and Michael? He was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents like they held answers instead of just horrors. Some secrets need to stay buried, Margaret. Like that suitcase you found at the lake. Like the truth about who Michael really is, like the fact that Emily and Michael are blood relatives who fell in love in ignorance. You're blackmailing them, holding the truth over them. I'm protecting them, protecting all of us. If this comes out, the illegal adoptions, the relationship, everything, it destroys everyone. Emily's reputation, Michael's life, your legacy, mine. So yes, I'm keeping them apart. I'm keeping them silent. And I'm keeping you from making a terrible mistake by threatening them, by making my daughter disappear. She's not disappeared. She's safe, away from temptation, away from Michael, away from disaster. He moved closer, and I saw genuine belief in his eyes, the conviction of someone who'd convinced himself his cruelty was kindness. In time she'll understand. She'll see I did this for us, for our marriage, for... You're insane. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist, just like I'd seen him do to Emily months ago. I'm the only sane person in this nightmare. Everyone else is willing to let feelings destroy facts. Well, I deal in facts, Margaret. And the fact is, if you keep digging, if you expose this, everyone loses. Everyone. I looked at his hand on my wrist, at the pressure marks he was leaving. Then I looked at his face. You already lost, David. The moment you hurt my daughter. I yanked my hand away and stood. I'm going to the police, with everything. And you're going to tell me where Emily is, or I swear to God? The police, he laughed. With what evidence? A birth certificate from a lake, conspiracy theories. They'll think you're a grieving mother who's lost her mind. I'm wearing a wire. David, you just confessed to attempted murder, kidnapping, and blackmail. The color drained from his face. For 3 seconds, we stood frozen. Then he lunged. I ran through the kitchen, heading for the back door. But he was faster, younger, desperate. His hand caught my collar, spinning me around. We crashed into the counter. You stupid woman, you've ruined everything. Something in his hand. I glimpsed metal, a knife from the block. Instinct made me grab his wrist, fighting with strength I'd forgotten I had. We struggled. The knife clattered away. He shoved me backward and I fell, head cracking against the cabinet. Then he was gone. I heard the front door slam, an engine roar to life. By the time I staggered outside, David's car was disappearing down the street, driving like a man fleeing demons or driving toward them. My phone. I fumbled for it, dialed Henry. Margaret, did you... Call the police, he's running, he's heading... I stopped, sudden terrible certainty flooding through me. He's heading to the lake. Henry, he's going to the lake. I'm calling 911 now. Stay where you... He's going to destroy evidence, or himself, or... I couldn't finish. Within an hour, half of Willow Creek's police force was at Lake Juniper. We found David's truck in the water, submerged near the spot where he'd thrown the suitcases. Both doors were open. Engine was still running when they pulled it out, but David Turner's body was never found. 3 months after David Turner's truck was pulled from Lake Juniper, the case was officially closed. Suicide while suffering from severe psychological distress, the medical examiner's report concluded, though there was no body to examine, no note to analyze, just an empty truck, dark water, and the kind of silence that fills spaces where answers should be, the recording I'd made, David's confession about the car accident, the manipulation, the blackmail, sparked a federal investigation into the old hospital adoption scandal. 17 families were contacted. 12 living Mercy babies were found, including Michael, or Marcus, or whoever he'd learned to be. I testified 3 times. Each time they asked me to explain how it felt to discover my son wasn't dead, that he'd been alive for 35 years while I mourned. Each time I gave them facts instead of feelings, because feelings were too large, too complicated, too much like trying to hold an ocean in your hands. Emily remained missing. Officially missing, the police searched, followed leads that went nowhere, questioned people who knew nothing. David's files revealed properties he'd accessed, places he might have hidden her, but every cabin, every storage unit, every possibility turned up empty. She's not in danger, I kept telling the detectives, though I had no proof. She's hiding, she's safe somewhere waiting. Waiting for what, Mrs. Collins? For it to be safe to come home. They looked at me with pity. Another mother in denial, unable to accept her daughter might be dead. But I knew. The way mothers know, Emily was alive. The evidence came on a Wednesday in April, exactly 4 months after David's death was declared official. I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Postmark from Flagstaff, Arizona. Inside was a single photograph. Emily, my daughter, standing in front of a small adobe house, desert landscape stretching behind her. Mountains purple in the distance. She was smiling, really smiling, the way she used to before David, before everything. and in her arms, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, was a baby. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I turned the photo over. Emily's handwriting, the same handwriting from the note in the suitcase. Some loves need to bloom far from pain. We're well, Mom. Forgive me for not coming back yet. One day. I love you forever. I sat on my porch and cried for an hour. Charlie curled against my side, purring his comfort, while cherry blossoms fell like snow from the tree Thomas had planted the year we married. She was safe. She was alive. She was free. That was enough. It had to be enough. I never showed the photograph to the police. Some secrets deserve to stay secret. Some escapes deserve to stay escapes. Henry Walker published his story 3 weeks later. The Mercy Babies, Stolen Lives, Found Family ran in newspapers across Oregon, then got picked up nationally. It exposed everything: the hospital scheme, David's obsession, the tangled web of adoption and manipulation and tragedy that had connected us all. The story won awards. Henry was interviewed on national television, but he never mentioned where Emily was, never revealed the photograph I'd shown him in confidence. Some stories, he told me over coffee one morning, are about truth. Others are about mercy. This one's both. We'd been having coffee together frequently by then. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning at the Blue Heron Cafe, where he'd order terrible black coffee and I'd get chamomile tea, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. He made me laugh again. I'd forgotten that was possible. You know, he said one May morning, cherry blossoms still drifting past the cafe windows, I've been thinking about writing a book, long-form investigation into the adoption scandal, all the stories we found, the families torn apart and stitched back together wrong. That sounds important. I'd need a research partner, someone who understands what it means to lose family, to find them again. He looked at me over his coffee cup, eyes knowing. Someone willing to travel, conduct interviews, dig through old records. I've never written a book. Neither have I. Could be an adventure. I thought about my empty house, my quiet days, the way time stretched endlessly when you were waiting for a future that might never arrive. An adventure sounds nice. We started the book in June. By August, we'd interviewed 8 other Mercy babies, pieced together stories that made mine look simple by comparison. Families who'd spent decades searching, siblings who'd met as strangers and recognized something in each other's eyes, parents who'd never stopped mourning children who turned out to be alive, and slowly, carefully, like spring returning after a brutal winter, I learned how to live again. Henry became more than a research partner. He became someone I looked forward to seeing, someone whose knock on my door made Charlie purr with recognition, someone who filled the silence with presence instead of absence. We never labeled what we were, didn't need to, just 2 people who'd seen darkness and decided to choose light anyway. On Emily's birthday, November 15th, I drove to Lake Juniper alone. I'd started this ritual after the first envelope, and it had become sacred. I brought wildflowers, Emily's favorite, the kind that grew wild on the hills in summer. I stood at the water's edge, at the exact spot where this had all begun, where I'd seen David throw that suitcase and everything changed. The lake was calm that day, mirror smooth, reflecting clouds and sky, keeping its secrets the way lakes do. I laid the flowers on the water and watched them drift, carried by current toward the deep parts where light doesn't reach. Happy birthday, baby girl, I whispered. Wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I hope you're free. I hope you know I understand why you can't come home yet. The flowers floated away, small spots of color on dark water. Behind me, I heard a car door close, Henry's boots crunching on gravel. You okay? He asked, coming to stand beside me. I am, and I was not fixed. Some things can't be fixed, only accepted, but okay. Learning to carry grief and hope in the same hands, understanding they weren't opposites but twins. That night, Henry made dinner at my place. We ate on the porch, watching stars emerge one by one, Charlie supervising from his perch. Do you think they'll ever come back? Henry asked. Emily and Michael. Maybe, when it's safe, when enough time has passed that the scandal dies down, when that baby is old enough to ask questions and they're ready to answer them. I sipped my wine. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll build a whole life out there, away from this place and its ghosts. How do you make peace with that? By understanding that sometimes love means letting go, means accepting that the people we love might need to be far away to be okay. I looked at him, and by understanding that life keeps going, that there's still beauty and possibility, even when things are broken, he reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was warm, calloused from years of typing, real in a way that grounded me. Margaret Collins, you're a remarkable woman. Henry Walker, you're not so bad yourself. We sat like that as darkness settled. Two people who'd found each other through tragedy and decided to build something anyway. A year later, a second envelope arrived. This one contained 3 photos. Emily with a toddler who had Thomas's eyes and Emily's smile. Michael, because I knew it had to be Michael, standing with his arm around Emily, looking peaceful in a way I'd never seen him in those old photographs. And the third, all 3 of them in front of a small carpenter's workshop, a sign reading, Green Family Woodworks, on the back. We're building a good life, Mom. He's teaching me carpentry, I'm teaching her to garden, she calls me Mama and him Papa, and doesn't know yet how complicated family can be. Maybe she never will. Thank you for not looking for us. Thank you for understanding one day. I promise. Love always. I showed Henry the photos that evening. We were working on the book. Now almost finished. Publisher interested. Advance already spent on a new laptop and a vacation we were planning to the coast. They look happy, he said. They do. Does it hurt, not being able to be part of it? Every day. I traced Emily's face in the photograph. But it would hurt more to know she wasn't safe, to know she wasn't free. I put the photos in a box with the first one, tucked them away in my dresser drawer, evidence of a parallel life running alongside mine. A daughter I couldn't see but knew was out there, building happiness from the wreckage David had tried to create. Our book was published the following spring. Reclaimed, Stories of the Mercy Babies became a regional bestseller, sparked legislative changes in adoption law, helped 3 more families reconnect. Henry and I moved in together that summer, nothing dramatic, just a gradual accumulation of his belongings in my house, his coffee cup taking permanent residence in my cabinet, his laughter filling rooms that had been quiet too long. He proposed on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no grand gesture, just the 2 of us at Lake Juniper, laying flowers on the water for Emily's birthday. I know we said we didn't need labels, he said, holding a simple silver band. But I'd like to label this as permanent, if you'll have me. I looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the lake that had brought us together through darkness. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll have you. We married at the courthouse with Robert Chen and Hank Morrison as witnesses. Dinner afterward at the Blue Heron Cafe, where we'd had our first real conversation, simple, small, perfect. That night, I stood on my porch, our porch now, with Henry's arm around my waist, looking out at Willow Creek sleeping under stars. Do you have regrets? He asked, about how everything happened. I regret that David was hurt so badly he became someone who hurt others. I regret that the hospital stole babies and destroyed families. I regret that Emily and Michael can't come home. I leaned against him. But I don't regret fighting for the truth, or finding you, or learning that even broken things can become beautiful if you're patient. In the distance, Lake Juniper reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds. Some secrets rise from dark water whether you want them to or not, but some, the ones that deserve protection, the ones that keep people safe, deserve to stay submerged. And me, I learned to live in the space between knowing and not knowing, between holding on and letting go, between the daughter I couldn't see and the life I could build. Every year on Emily's birthday, I bring flowers to the water. Every year I whisper, I love you, I'm proud of you, come home when you're ready. And every year I walk away, knowing that love doesn't require proximity. Sometimes it just requires trust. Trust that the people we love are making their own peace, finding their own happiness, building their own version of home. And that's enough. It has to be. It is.